The 7 Deadly Sins task. Not hard to guess what Charlie is in Big Brother at 10. Renowned for a new series, Dame Diana Rigg goes back to her imperial past as one of Empire's children.
The story of the British Empire has played a big part in shaping our national identity. Only 70 years ago, Britain ruled over a quarter of the globe. But in the space of just a few decades, the empire was dismantled. It was a process that would radically change Britain and the way we see ourselves.
I'm not a very patriotic person. I don't even sort of think about it, but I've sort of been leaping to the defence of the British.
Now 6 Britons are journeying into their imperial pasts to discover how the empire transformed their own family's history.
To think of any member of your family having to live in conditions like this makes you sad.
And how the legacy of empire has defined modern Britain.
This is Mrs. Rigg's kedgeree. Kedgeree was an English use of the Indian word kitchery. This is cheap, nutritious, and absolutely delicious, thanks to Mrs. Rigg. As soon as I put a mouthful into my mouth, it transports me back to my childhood.
Diana Rigg, 60s icon of the small and big screen, is best known for playing Emma Peel in The Avengers and Tracy DiVincenzo, the only woman who James Bond ever married. What is less well known about Diana is that she grew up in India, the daughter of a railway engineer in the final days of the British Raj.
There's quite a lot I can't remember. I can remember smells and sounds, and I've definitely got impressions. They're kind of spectral, they're ghost-like, and I think perhaps the reality will happen during this journey.
Now, Diana's embarking on a journey to discover the part her family played in the last chapter of the British Empire. She's on her way to Somerset to see her brother Hugh, who also grew up in India.
We're going to Porlock to see my brother, my big brother. He's the keeper, if you like, of the family history and the family archive and everything. And he's got all the photograph albums and letters and things. Also, his memories of India are rather sharper than mine because he was 4 years older.
Diana hasn't looked at the photos and letters for years, and she wants to take some of them with her on her journey.
This morning I started off by making a Mrs. Rigg's kedgeree. And I can't remember the food in India. Can you? What did we eat?
I do remember goat's milk. Pop kept goats in the Bikaner garden.
Yeah.
And so we were brought up on that. I do remember eating an awful lot of brain.
Really?
Yes. Can't stand the stuff now.
Was that his handwriting?
That's his handwriting.
Was, yeah.
You and your horse.
Yeah, amazing. There is so much, you know, that I wish I'd asked
Well, me too.
our
Me
parents
too.
about. I mean, like, you know, Dad's early life and what prompted him to go there.
Yeah.
And did he ever talk about it to you?
Never. I never asked him.
But it's astonishing that
you
he
didn't.
Yeah.
Our generation didn't do that sort of thing.
You didn't question your parents, did you, really?
No, you didn't. No, you just took them for what they were.
Diana's father, Louis Rigg, was born in Doncaster in 1903. At 15, he began an engineering apprenticeship with the local railway. Diana's on her way to Doncaster to see if she can find out more about her father's early life and why he decided to go to India.
We're going to see my father's house, which is extraordinary because I never saw it. My grandfather on my mother's side was manager of the gentleman's department of the co-op. I think my mother's family rather looked down on my father's family, and there was very little interplay between the two families.
Louis Rigg grew up here. His father worked for the railways, and their house was originally a railway cottage. Phyllis Milbank, the current owner, and Mervyn Wetherall, her tenant, have agreed to let Diana see the house for the first time.
Come in. Thank you. Hello.
I was going to buy you a book and I thought, well, you can't be bothered with that.
That's perfect.
So I thought if I give
I'll
you
be
that...
able to wear it all through the day.
Bless you. I've always been an admirer of you.
Oh, thank you.
Ever since, well...
Ever since.
That is the kitchen, and
Yeah.
this is the outside. This was the main wall, and this has been built on extra.
Oh, I see.
And of course, the garden was lovely, and we've had it bricked, you see. And then there was the toilet down here. There was
Outside lavvy?
Yeah, outside lavvy.
Golly, that must have been chill in the winter.
It would be. Let me show you the back. Imagine coming out here in the night, and this is the toilet.
Oh my
And again,
Struth!
but that is
throne.
that is a new,
Yes, of course.
cistern, you see, because
Yeah.
it was one of these pull things,
Yeah.
real antiquated,
Yeah.
and you can imagine how cold it was
Must
in the
be
night. And then
dreadful.
if this door was left open, people walking past would see you under there.
No.
It was unusual for working-class men like Diana's father to up and leave for a distant outpost of the empire, and Diana is curious to find out what prompted him to go. At the National Railway Museum, Diana's meeting John Scott Morgan, an historian who has done some research into her father's early life.
My dad worked for LNER, but he was always such a modest man. He never told me anything about his background, but I gather you've discovered quite a lot.
We have actually. I understand, in fact, he started with the Great Northern Railway in 1921. From research we've done, it sounds as if he was either a premium apprentice or a pupil, which means he would have been directly under the tutelage of the chief mechanical engineer, who in fact designed this locomotive Mallard.
No! Amazing.
I've managed to find the advertisement your father responded to in 1925.
My goodness me.
Yes, here it is. That might
The
interest you.
life-changing advertisement.
Absolutely.
How extraordinary. Here it says here, Jodhpur Railway Junior Locomotive Office. Applicants must be public school men. Now, how amazing. Now, my dad was not a public school boy, and he was not a fibber. So how would he have got round that?
Basically, it's because he went to a technical grammar school in Doncaster that specialised in training people for technical skills and careers, and an awful lot of the people from Doncaster Grammar School went into the railway industry.
By the time Louis booked his passage to India, the British Empire covered 14 million square miles. A small elite of British administrators, drawn from the ranks of English public schools, governed over a quarter of the world's population. In India, a mere 1,500 English civil servants, the so-called heaven-born, ruled over 300 million Indians. But they still needed highly skilled working-class men, like Diana's father, to maintain the infrastructure of empire. What Louis couldn't have known as he embarked for India in 1925 was that Britain's imperial authority was already being challenged, and that the Raj would only last for another 20 years. Diana's flown out to Jodhpur in India to follow the trail of her father's imperial adventure.
Here we are, driving along, and of course the driver's hooting his horn, and the cattle on the road. You just don't expect to see cows foraging amongst refuse, but you do in India.
Diana's going to be catching a train from Jodhpur to Bikaner, on the edge of the Thar Desert, where her father was first stationed when he arrived in India to join the Raj.
It's all about pushing yourself to be the best you can be. But you can never do it alone. You need to know you have a great team behind you.
Abby are part of a great team, the Santander Group, who have more branches worldwide than any other international bank.
You need to work with people who understand you, who listen to you, and are committed to you succeeding together.
Visit your local branch and talk to us about our bank account with 8% AER interest. We think it's a winning formula.
Filippo Berio, 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 olive oil. For all the flavors in the world, there's only one, a masterpiece.
Filippo Berio, a masterpiece in olive oil.
I challenged Churchill and he guaranteed to beat the price I was paying for my car insurance.
Oh, yes.
He ended up saving me £123 on the insurance of my Volkswagen Golf.
Oh, yes.
And I even got an extra discount by buying online.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes. Sorry.
If you haven't claimed for 3 years, we guarantee to beat the renewal price for your insurance. Challenge Churchill at churchill.com.
Jake's dad bought him a laptop, and he's got an Xbox 360 and a new iPod, 30 gigs, and video playback. Dad? He's dead jammy.
I'm looking forward to meeting Jake's dad at Sports Day.
Oh, he won't be there. He never is. He's more of a virtual dad. Not like you. Can't get rid of you.
Werther's Original, made from real butter and fresh cream.
You wouldn't let your child eat off the street, yet there could be 30,000 bacteria on every inch of your table. Fact, most spray cleaners don't kill bacteria. But Dettol 4-in-1, 1 kills 99.9% of bacteria, 2 cuts grease as well as the top kitchen cleaner, 3 tackles soap scum as well as the top bathroom cleaner, and 4 freshens whilst it cleans. Dettol 4-in-1 helps protect your family, even when you're not watching. Dettol protects. Fact.
Is technology the enemy of nature?
Some people think it's
Is greatness a matter of size? Do you need vast spaces to feel safe? Do you need 2 liters of fuel to get 1 liter of milk? Isn't it easier to stop asking questions? Yes, but we won't, because we care.
You think it makes me feel good the rest of the family has a life and I have nothing?
The next time you have something to say about me, would you please say it to my face, because I would really appreciate it.
When are you gonna grow up? You're a piece of work just like Dad.
Brothers and Sisters continues Wednesday at 10 on 4.
Diana Rigg is on her way to Bikaner, where her dad was first posted in 1925 as a junior railway engineer, to find out more about the part he played in the British Empire. The symbols of the imperial legacy in India, especially in terms of the railways, are all around. Bikaner is not on the official tourist trail, and the most practical way to reach the city to this day is via the Jodhpur-Bikaner railway, on which her father worked for more than 20 years.
It must have been quite extraordinary from Doncaster to Bikaner. Totally different everything.
During the Raj, the British only ruled directly over 2/3 of the Indian subcontinent. The other third was made up of the so-called princely states, governed by Indian royalty. The Hindu kings were known as Maharajas, and two of the most powerful princely states in Rajasthan were Jodhpur and Bikaner. Rather than trying to overthrow the Maharajas, the British had co-opted them as a cost-effective alternative to administering the states themselves. In return for joining forces with the British, the Maharajas were allowed to continue raising taxes and governing the internal affairs of their states, including the building of roads and railways. Just over 30 years before Louis arrived, the Maharaja of Bikaner had opened his first state railway. As well as his working-class background, there was another thing that separated Louis from most of his fellow Englishmen in India. He wouldn't be working for a white employer.
His boss was the Maharaja of Bikaner, which must have set him apart from most of the other English people who were working in Bikaner. And I think in terms of English snobbery, he was pretty low down in the pecking order.
As a junior engineer with an Indian employer, Louis and another English bachelor initially shared a modest bungalow. One of the first things Louis did was to hire a tutor to teach him to speak Hindi. Many of the newly arrived Saabs quickly developed a reputation for high-handed treatment of their local staff. Diana wants to know how her father's remembered, and she's keen to meet a local who worked for him. Ranveer Singh, her local guide, has found a man who worked as an apprentice on the Bikaner Railway in the early 40s and remembers Louis well.
Just missed a cow.
He still lives in the old city, whose medieval streets are so narrow they can only be navigated by rickshaw.
Yes, yes.
Very nice.
Very nice to see you. Very happy to meet you.
Thank you. You remember my father quite clearly?
Yes, yes. I remember him very thoroughly, you see. I was appointed on the railways in 1941.
Yes.
And at the time he was a loco and carriage superintendent in the railway workshops.
And how well did you know him when you worked under him?
People respect their officers out of fear. But it was not in the case of Mr. Rigg. They actually respect him from the core of their heart. And he was liked very much by the staff.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yes.
And when he left Bikaner, you were there?
In 1943.
Yes.
A farewell party was given to Mr. Rigg.
Yes.
By the office staff.
Yes.
As well as the workshop staff.
Yes.
So there was a great gathering to give him a farewell party. So I wrote a poem in honor of Mr. Rigg.
How wonderful. Do you still have it?
Yes. It's very difficult because it's in a tortured way, you see.
Yes. Can you read?
I think I should read out from it.
I'd love to hear it.
And translate in English. That will be suitable.
Oh, would you do that?
The poem starts, आना जाना क्रम दुनिया का विश्व बड़ा मेला है. In this world, people come and go. because this world is like a great congregation, like a great fair. And जिसने मेल किया जन जन से रहता नहीं अकेला है. The person who has loved others, he is never forgotten in his life. People remember only that person who loves his people. So Mr. Rigg was such a man who loved his staff. Then, this is the last stanza. आज विदाई की वेला है. This is the occasion of departure, eve of departure. हृदय व्यथा से भारी है. Hearts are heavy with your separation. जहाँ रहो सुखमय जीवन हो, यह कामना हमारी है. This is our heartfelt desire for you, that wherever you go, you and your family, everyone should lead a prosperous and happy life.
Louis's new boss, Maharaja Ganga Singh, was an extraordinary character. His feared Camel Corps fought in both world wars, and as ADC to King George V, he was present at the signing of the Treaty of Versailles. In later years, he was a benevolent despot who not only built railways and canals to bring water to his desert state, but also made education free for all his subjects. As one of the Maharaja's junior, unmarried engineers, much of Louis's time would have been spent out in the desert at what was known as the end of the line. As well as the harsh working conditions, it could be a very lonely existence. But then, in 1929, 4 years after arriving in Bikaner, Louis qualified for 6 months' leave. Top of his agenda in returning home was to find a wife. As it took 6 weeks to get there and 6 weeks to get back, Louis would only have 3 months at home in Doncaster to find himself a bride.
I think he belonged to a tennis club in Doncaster, and of course that's a very good place to audition young women. And his eye fell upon my mum, and I think he knew immediately.
At 21, Beryl Halliwell, the daughter of the manager of the gentleman's tailoring department of the local co-op, had never before set foot outside England. The couple got engaged, but it was more than 2 years before Louis was able to persuade Beryl to make the 6-week voyage to India. They were married in Bombay and honeymooned at a remote hill station. But Louis turned out to be rather more romantically inclined than Beryl had bargained for, as one of her first letters home makes clear.
As I write this on the veranda, there's a monkey swinging on one of the trees outside. And then she goes on to say, every 15 minutes my husband makes a lunge at me and kisses me. I had no idea he was such a mushy creature, or I'd have said no at the psychological moment. He says he can't quite realize we really are married, and he does it to make sure. Of course, I give him a spot of encouragement. I feel just the same myself, and we are both most frightfully happy and thrilled with life.
2 weeks later, the couple were settling into their new married quarters in Bikaner. Local guide Ranveer Singh has found the Riggs' now derelict old house.
Oh my goodness.
This used to be the veranda viewing the beautiful garden.
Yes.
And this used to be the sitting room.
Oh my goodness.
With the fireplace and
Yes.
the high roof.
Can you imagine my mother trying to make this look like somewhere from England? Because that's what all the English did.
I know.
They made their houses as English as possible.
Exactly.
I wish I remembered more of it, but it's sort of interesting coming back to somewhere where you lived, which is now a ruin. A lot of our early life was spent on the veranda because we certainly weren't allowed to go out beyond the walls. I remember. I mean, it was absolutely forbidden, and so it was a sort of little enclave here.
Diana's mother found herself relieved of all the humdrum daily chores she would have had to do back in Doncaster. With the bungalow came a small army of servants to wait on the family hand, foot and finger. But there was no sense of guilt about the discrepancy in their quality of life.
It simply didn't exist, any guilt at all. It was only afterwards that there was guilt. I mean, I remember during the civil disturbances in America, saying to my mother, how could we possibly have lived like that with servants and in not very good housing at the back of our house, and we were forbidden to go visit the servants' quarters. And how could we live like that? I suppose I was attacking her slightly, poor woman, and I remember her replying, "But, darling, that was the way it was," and I think that was the attitude.
As well as being waited on by servants, Beryl would also soon find herself moving in exotic social circles. She and her new husband would shortly be invited to the palaces of the Maharaja, alongside Indian princes and some of the most senior officials of the British Empire.
Eon are here and they're changing energy for good. They're developing one of the world's largest offshore wind farms right here in the UK. This is what change feels like.
Whatever it is that gets you going, with Expedia, you can tailor-make it.
Let yourself go. 60 minus 6, 54, minus 6, 48.
Paper, rock, scissors.
Give your brain a daily workout with new More Brain Training, only on Nintendo DS.
Here we go. Start again.
More is our triple promise on car insurance. 1. With More Than, you can protect your maximum no claims bonus for the life of your policy. Meaning 2, we won't raise your premium just because you make a claim. And 3, we'll give you a 10% discount when you call, or even more online. Call 0800 300 800 or visit us at morethan.com for a 15% discount.
Is your money snoozing away in a sleepy savings account? Over half pay less than 4% interest. Wake up your money with a Sainsbury's Internet Saver account, paying a lively 6% interest. Sainsbury's. Try something new today.
What's the future for Iraq? Join Jon Snow as Channel 4 investigates, 10 past midnight.
In 1932, Diana Rigg's parents were settling into their new married quarters in the desert state of Bikaner. Life for a new bride in such a small community could be socially daunting, as she quickly became the centre of attention.
By the by, I must tell you this one. Do you know that for 1 year I'm the most important person in Bic, meaning Bicanir? As a bride, I have the honour to sit on the right hand of all my hosts, and if we dine at the palace, I shall have to be taken in by HH, meaning His Highness the Maharaja. Mrs. Parry told me this last night. He didn't do it with her, and I hope to goodness he doesn't do it with me. I should expire on the spot. So sweet. Can you imagine the horror? All the way from Doncaster to be led in to a grand banquet by a Maharaja.
The Lakshmi Nivas Palace was Maharaja Ganga Singh's private residence. He built a special annex to the palace to entertain his many guests. Today, it's a luxury heritage hotel. The manager has offered to show Diana the old banqueting hall, where her parents would have been entertained by the Maharaja.
And this was?
This is the area from where the guests used to come for the state functions.
Yes.
And this was the place where the state band used to play.
And then?
Ma'am, Maharaja used to lead the guest of honor to this banquet hall.
It's very empty now, but...
yeah, it's very empty.
Once upon a time.
Once upon a time.
It must have looked
very
wonderful.
Elegant and
tables,
well carpets
full
and
of
tables.
Silver.
It was in this very room that Maharaja Ganga Singh entertained the Riggs and other guests in the 30s and early 40s. Beryl didn't write about her first encounter with the Maharaja, but it was to be just one of many. While Indian men were allowed to mix freely with European women at such social gatherings and vice versa, Indian women were kept secluded from men in what was known as purdah.
And the corridor where the ladies used to stand and watch the ceremonial functions.
And they were in purdah?
Yeah, they were in purdah.
But they would watch the guests eating.
They can watch
drinking.
the guests, they can see the guests from the function, from behind the curtains.
Fascinating. Amazing.
In 1934, just over a year after Beryl arrived in Bikanir, Diana's brother Hugh was born, and Diana followed 4 years later. It wasn't just grand dinners at the palace to which the Rigg family were invited. They were also regular guests at the Maharaja's lakeside hunting lodge at Gajnir, about 30 miles west of Bikanir in the Thar Desert, where Diana is now headed. Special gatherings were held at Christmas and New Year at Gajnir, and the residents of Bikanir vied for invitations. By now, Louis had been promoted to loco and carriage superintendent, and he and Beryl found themselves not only rubbing shoulders with Indian royalty, but also the most senior officials of the British Empire. One of Beryl's letters home paints a vivid picture of a Gajnir hunt.
We didn't go to the butts with the men. I wanted to, but H said it was too hot for us, so we watched from the lakeside. It was a very new experience for me to see what happened. An aide-de-camp, or someone, fired the first shot. This was to make the birds rise up from the lake. It was extraordinary. They simply rose in a cloud when that shot was fired. Then HH fired the first shot after the birds had risen, and then all the men started. there were about 10 men shooting, and they got about 570 birds. H.H. himself got 170 birds, but then he had 3 guns and 3 loaders, so all he had to do was shoot. All the men were placed, rather, in order of precedence. And so the Maharaja would be in the middle, and I suppose his guest of honor on the right, and so it went on down the line. And because my father was low down in precedence, he was right at the end of the line. So I think he only, on that occasion, he only got about 3 birds. But that's the way it was. And he didn't mind because he absolutely adored shooting.
Diana is meeting Captain Chandra Singh Bharti, whose father was the ADC to the Maharaja. Captain Bharti has memories not only of the hunts at Gajner, but also of an incident when Diana's dad was on his way to his club and Captain Bharti hit his car with a stone from the schoolyard.
No much damage was done, no glass was broken, he was not hit, but nevertheless I hit the car. So Mr. Rigg, naturally, he got annoyed. He went to the club and he made a complaint to my principal. I had to apologize to Mr. Rigg. I went to the club immediately and I said, sorry sir, I'm so-and-so's son. He said, oh, but you shouldn't have done it. I said, I'm very sorry. He said, young boys can do it, you know, it's perfectly all right, don't bother about it. He gave me some sweets to eat and it was all right.
Oh,
was
good.
That was in the club. In the later day when he used to come here, I was just a boy about 15, 16 years old, but we used to go for shooting also. We used to go out and Mr. Rigg always used to chide me that you are a good shot, you can shoot these crowds, of course.
He never forgot.
No, he never forgot, but he was very kind, he was all smiling, all joke.
Oh, how sweet. We in England have the impression now we were largely not very well behaved towards the native population and acted in
I wouldn't call that. Of course, they were administrators, you know, but if you ask my opinion very frankly, they were much better than the Dutch and the French.
Oh, really?
Extremely, very much
good
better.
To hear.
Very much better, because we had the freedom of the press, which was very important. That was from the time of Lord Ripon. We had the railways, which helped us very much. And then India became a much united country because of this English language, you know.
Yes, yes.
And it was, of course, a foreign rule, so
yes.
Naturally. But
not entirely welcome.
Well, anybody's rule, foreign rule, is not welcome anywhere.
Exactly, yeah.
Resistance to foreign rule, led by Mahatma Gandhi, had been gaining more and more popular support ever since Louis arrived in the 1920s. And in August 1942, Gandhi officially launched the Quit India campaign. Along with many of the other leaders of the movement, he was promptly imprisoned. In October of the following year, Louis Rigg was offered a job on the Jodhpur Railway, eventually, at the age of 40, becoming Chief Mechanical Engineer. He was now in charge of some 3,000 staff and more than 100 locomotives. The equivalent position in Britain usually attracted a knighthood. With the new job came an equally grand house, a far cry from the 2 up, 2 down in Doncaster where he grew up. But it was nothing compared to the house being built by his new boss, the Maharaja of Jodhpur, one of the richest men in India. In 1929, during a severe famine, Umaid Singh had begun building himself a new palace. 3,000 artisans were employed to build the largest private residence in the world, with over 300 rooms. The royal family claimed that employing the men was a form of famine relief, but admitted that they needed the extra entertaining space. But neither Louis nor the Maharaja would have much time to enjoy their new houses. With the end of the war in 1945 and Gandhi's release from prison the previous year, pressure for independence was building. The largely non-violent Quit India movement had been ruthlessly suppressed, and in response there were isolated attacks on strategic British interests.
A sense of unease had spread through the country. Nobody quite knew what was going to happen. Certainly on my father's side, a lot of railways were being blown up, and the danger, I don't think was very great, but there was a danger. And so a lot of people took the safe view and sent their wives and children home with a view to following a bit later on.
Once Beryl had settled 7-year-old Diana and her brother at boarding school in England, she returned to India to be with her husband. In 1947, with independence just around the corner, Louis and Beryl held a farewell party for their closest friends. Among the guests was Baiji, a member of the Jodhpur royal family. Diana's going to the Maharaja of Jodhpur's palace to meet Baiji, who still lives there. Like most women, Baiji was kept in Purdah before independence and was forbidden from socializing with Indian men. But these restrictions did not apply to interactions with Europeans.
Welcome to the palace now.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Diana.
What a great pleasure. How wonderful
I'm
to
glad
see
they
you.
welcomed you in the proper way.
Do sit down, won't you? I bought you some photographs. Do you remember this, that you signed to my parents?
Oh, my God.
In 1947.
That's 60 years ago,
Yeah,
Diana.
I know.
And I look like that. It's wonderful.
So beautiful. And there are some photographs, too, of groups.
Your father always had a tremendous smile on his face and so on. He was always clowning, you know.
Yes,
He
yes.
always had an arm around somebody and
Yes.
always a big grin on his face.
And then with independence, did you get more freedom then?
Well, I was declared that I got my independence same time as India.
That must have been the same for a lot of Indian women, suddenly finding that they could...
They were then beginning to come out, but of course in Rajasthan we didn't have much freedom in those days. That's why to get my independence was a
Yes.
very big thing.
In July 1947, just a month before independence, Beryl bade farewell to India for the last time. But Louis stayed on to serve out a further year on his contract. Left alone in Jodhpur, Louis seems to have spent more and more time at the Sardar Club, where he came to play tennis and golf. Diana is meeting Dilip Singh, a nephew of the Maharaja and still a regular golfer at the club.
I'm so looking forward to seeing
the old names.
Yes. Wonderful room. Enormous. And this club was famous for its golf, obviously.
It's famous because I think it is the only course that used to have 13 holes.
Only 13?
Only 13.
And why was that?
Because of the time factor that the British people who were working here in the state, they only had time enough to leave their office, come and play 13 holes, and by that time it would be dark.
And time for a drink.
And to get together
Time
in the
to
bar.
get back to the bar. How amazing.
I think you can see your father's name there.
Oh, yes. He won the cup with Mr. Wotherspoon in 1947.
47.
How amazing.
After 1947, the names are all Indian names, because by that time the British had left.
Of course, yes. So the Indians got to practice golf.
Yes. There you can, you can see the tennis courts.
Oh, yes.
And beyond that is the golf course.
After the British left, the Maharajas similarly didn't seem to give up power.
Well, I think the Quit India movement was so powerful that if they hadn't done that, maybe we would have ended up like the Russian Revolution.
Heads chopped.
So I think it was a good thing that they did give up their powers and hand it over.
The Maharajas' alliance with the British had cost them their political future, and Indian independence saw not only the end of the Raj, but also of the centuries-old way of life of India's kings. In 1948, Louis Rigg finally set sail for England to join his family. He had been away for 20 years, and at the age of 45, it would not be easy for him to start all over again in a post-war Britain changed beyond recognition and still dogged by rationing and unemployment.
Once upon a time, we stood for something.
What does it mean to be British today?
Our mum's a black man on the telly. Come and look, 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 look.
As seen through the eyes of 6 loyal subjects of the Empire.
Thank God British women have actually discovered how to hide their hips.
The British Empire strikes back right after Empire's children over a Moor fall.
Let the power of nature into your home. Switch to Go Green, the greener energy package from PowerGen. Call now on 0800 450 888.
Ronseal Perfect Finish Floor Varnish and its Perfect Finish pad gives a smooth, brush mark-free finish that's, well, perfect.
Ronseal. It does exactly what it says on the tin.
Quit smoking, and this is what you're up against. Smoking increases the number of receptors in your brain that thrive on nicotine. Take their supply away, they go mad. They won't let you break the habit without a fight. Nicotine reduces cravings because it contains therapeutic nicotine, so you can wean the beasts off gradually and give your willpower a fighting chance to do the rest. Tame the beasts and quit with nicotine.
Come on, homeowners, challenge Churchill.
We did, and we saved £92 on our home insurance.
Oh, yes!
Guess what? Grey doesn't live here anymore. Or here, or here, or here. Because with Excellence Creme from L'Oreal, I not only get rich, radiant color, but also perfect grey coverage. First, the Excellent treatment preps and protects each hair, even the most fragile ones. Then a creamy, non-drip formula wraps each grey hair, even those wiry little ones. Triple protection, sensational, long-lasting color, and not a grey in sight. We are so worth that. Excellence Creme, only by L'Oreal Paris.
under, you are now free to leave the diary room.
Okay, you can go. Big Brother, I'm scared.
Big Brother, after Empire's Children.
Back in England, Diana Rigg wants to find out more about what life would have been like for her father, returning home after more than 20 years as part of the British Raj in India.
We're off to the Cotswolds to meet somebody called Denby Hamilton Harding, who lived out in India at the same time as we did. He's some years older than my brother, but they were friends out there, and I'm longing to see him again after God knows how many years.
Denby was 12 when he came back to England after the war, and has stronger memories of what it was like than Diana, who was only 7 at the time. Britain in 1945 had just elected a radical Labour government bent on creating a new, equitable society. The Raj, and all it represented, was now an embarrassment, and those returning from the empire were no longer privileged rulers. Denby's father had been the Minister of the Interior in Bikaner, but left India with virtually nothing.
Good morning.
Hello. Good morning to you.
Nice to see you again.
Denby's also invited his neighbour, Daphne Crabtree, who returned from India aged 15, to share her experiences with Diana.
Was life a tiny bit less colourful, a tiny bit more dull in England? What was the major change for you both? Because children adapt very easily.
Yeah, but we didn't have a home here, and it was at 1945, right at the end of the war. Couldn't get money out of India, and we lived in a loft over a garage at the back of my aunt's house.
No servants?
Oh no, didn't exist.
Yes.
And my mother put a curtain across the loft, and we lived on one side and slept on the other side, and there was a coal range and an outside loo.
I think my experience of coming home was quite different from Denby's. We lived in a flat in London, and London was vibrant and gay, and we loved the theatres. Everybody was relaxing after the war, but on the other hand, one felt very guilty for not having suffered the bombs and the doodlebugs and the rationing.
There was a certain resentment against the people who had not spent the war in England, and how did it manifest itself?
We did come across that, particularly with tradespeople who seemed to feel that we'd been living on the fat of the land out there. And when my brother was ill, my mother went to the grocer's and asked if he could spare her a little extra milk, because we all knew that milk was wasted. She wasn't proposing black market or anything, and he refused it to her.
Like the Hamilton Hardings and the Crabtrees, the Rigg family found that life was tough back in post-war Britain. Initially, they stayed with Beryl's parents in Doncaster, but at the age of 45, Louis found it hard to find work.
I can remember a lot of anxiety between my parents. I don't think they had a great deal of money. I don't think that they had saved any money, or much, from India, but whatever they had saved got terribly depleted.
Eventually, Louis did manage to get a job at a tanning machine company in Leeds, but it was a long way from being chief mechanical engineer of the Jodhpur Railway, and money remained tight. Diana's parents wanted to keep her brother at his private boarding school, but they planned to send her to the local grammar. But growing up as a child of empire in India, her education had been patchy at best.
What they unfortunately overlooked was the fact that my formal education was parlous. So, of course, I didn't get into Leeds grammar because I remember looking at the exam questions and thinking, I just don't know. I don't know what they're talking about. And ended up my poor parents paying for me to go to Full Neck Girls' School.
Diana is returning to the school for the first time in 50 years to meet the current principal, Trevor Kernahan.
Morning.
Good morning, Dame Diana. Welcome back to Full Neck School.
Thank you. Call me Diana.
I will do. Okay.
I'm so longing to see it.
Good.
Thank you.
Would you like to come and visit my study?
Aha.
You may remember this from...
I certainly do. It says
your early
principal's
days.
office, and you went knock, 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 and were sent up here if you'd been a naughty girl.
That's right.
Which I certainly was.
And I just occasionally see odd naughty children.
Yeah.
Now,
you don't chastise them in the manner that they used to.
Oh, no.
Because I remember walking along the terrace to go to the hall or the chapel or whatever, and it was summertime and the window was open, and this poor boy was bent over a chair with a master, very enthusiastically whopping his bottom.
Oh, dear, dear. No, nothing like that happens now. But you will remember the beautiful
it's
gowns.
Wonderful,
yes.
wonderful. Well, I'm sure it's a wonderful school now.
Oh, it is.
But it was pretty cheerless and joyless when I was here.
It's very much, I think, now centred on the individual needs of the child.
You see?
We take each individual, we bring out the best that they possibly have.
Which is wonderful, but in my day you were all lumped together. And if you ever...
Although Diana's childhood in India meant that she didn't fit into the English school system, it was at Full Neck that she discovered an aptitude for drama that launched her extremely successful acting career. She was made a dame in 1994 for her services to British stage and screen.
The full title is Dame of the British Empire. And it wasn't till after, actually, I'd been damed as to her, that I thought about what does it mean. And the empire, as we all know, is shrinking, not to say shrunk. And what am I dame of? One learnt a great deal during this journey. Although the British Empire had a reputation of suppression, exploitation here in England, it was far from the case amongst many of the Indians who actually now look back on the Raj as being a time of development, and talking, for example, to the apprentice that worked under my father and learning that my father treated him with respect and respected his culture, respected it enough to learn it, which was pretty difficult. So I'm not inclined to feel as ashamed as I did before I made the journey.
The series continues next week at 9. More on that coming up. Now, whether your family came from a British colony or helped run the empire, there are tips for tracing your history at channel4.com/empire. And on More 4 right now, The Empire Strikes Back, how it changed modern Britain.
The characters I play on screen are very English.
Actress Shobna Gulati represents the modern face of Britain.
But that's only one aspect of me.
Now she journeys to the Punjab for the first time to trace her family.
Yeah, that's my granddad.
And explore the layers of her identity. Empire's Children, next Monday at 9 on 4.
Sheila and Monica fight over Frank. He must love it. Shameless on E4 now. But next up here on Channel 4, temptation for Ziggy, but not involving Chanel in Big Brother.
This summer, when you buy Coke, you get music. You can win an iPod or free songs on iTunes.
Renew your tax credits by July the 31st, so we can make sure your payments don't stop. You can do it over the phone or by post. Either way, you must renew before July the 31st.
When you're looking for insurance, everyone says they could save you money.